London. And Startup Break, if you haven't met us before, operates on a very simple value. Well, first of all, I want to talk about what Startup Break is, if you don't know us. So Startup Break is a global community for startup founders, entrepreneurs, investors, industry professionals. We have chapters in most cities globally, and we operate on a very simple principle, which is that we make friendships before connections. So for tonight, and for every other day moving forward, I encourage you to take the same strategy and to give before you take. And we foster events like this every month. So if you enjoyed today, please keep an eye out on our social media, on your email, so that you know where to see us again. Well, of course, we wouldn't be here without our sponsors. So first and foremost, we have Airwallex. We're on their turf today, and they have been very gracious hosts. So please give it up for Airwallex for a very quick introduction.
Hi everybody, I'm just looking at the microphone, so hopefully you can all hear me. If you can't, just say something. Quickly before I go into anything, quick shout of hands. Who truthfully, and I'm not trying to name and shame you, who actually knows what Airwallex is or has heard of us? Show of hands. Okay, not too bad, not too bad. Good. So I guess quickly to introduce myself, my name's Jake, I'm an account manager here at Airwallex. I've worked with the business for about 2.5 years. I started off in the sales team as an SDR and grown into the account manager role. Including myself here today, I've got the amazing Finn here, and Deanna over there, and Natalie, who's the marketing director for EMEA. Unfortunately, she's not here, but she helped set this up and run this. So we have a very, very talented team here, and I think I'm very grateful for the fact that we get to work with some of the best of the business. So yeah, next slide. So I guess I should probably start off with, for those of you who don't know who we are, it's what exactly we do. Our main role at Airwallex is just trying to unlock new opportunities and grow beyond borders for businesses big and small. And what I mean by that is in an ever-growing globalised world, as we continue to do payments across borders, especially with businesses that want to expand to the US, Europe, China, APAC, I think there's an ever-growing need to have a very strong embedded global financial structure. And we're trying to break those borders that typically businesses face when going through that process. Next slide. So how do we do this? We build the best financial infrastructure to allow businesses to scale globally. So over the last 8 years, we've brought in talent from the likes of Stripe, Adyen, Visa, MasterCard, to build a process and a platform that allows customers to be able to scale globally at a pace that works for them, big and small. So if you go on to the next slide, to give you some idea of our numbers. I'm not obviously going to read out those, you can look for yourself. But I want to flag that not only are we trusted by big brands such as Shein, Navan, Farm Zero, just to name a few, I wouldn't want to put people off. We also work with businesses big and small, from your 1 to 5 business size all the way up to 1,000 plus. Our role here is to allow businesses to grow at their terms and allow to expand themselves globally. Additionally, as well, we partner with some of the best of the businesses from your JP Morgans, Visa, MasterCard, etc. We've spent the last 8 to 10 years trying to build out our global financial structure, and I think that makes us one of the best of the businesses as a result of that. Next slide. Just to give you a quick brand overview, I'm not going to go into much detail for what we do. We can pretty much put our product into 3 pillars: pay-ins, treasury management, and payouts. And within that, we offer a couple of different products on different verticals. On the pay-in side, we offer things such as payment gateway products, and also our global account structure. I think we very much have been a breakout in the sense of being able to open up an international bank account in the US, China, APAC, etc. in a matter of 3 seconds without having to have a company over there, which is, I think, a huge game changer, especially in this global market. From a treasury perspective, we have multi-account wallets, so being able to hold in over 20 plus different currencies and also do payouts in over 100 plus. And then from a payouts perspective, we offer things such as issuing cards, payouts on local rails, and the ability to send money over to over 150 different regions at an extremely low cost. And that's pretty much a brand summary on us. If you have any questions for me afterwards, feel free to come grab me or Finn. Yeah, thanks for coming this evening. Great to see you all. Cheers.
Our sponsors didn't finish here. Also, big shout out to TikTok, has been our sponsor since last year. In case you haven't yet experienced the platform, try it out. Yes, but if you haven't posted, for example, yourself, whether that is to grow your own personal brand or your business. They have actually hosted a really informative and insightful webinar with us last week, which really highlights and stresses out the importance of short-form video to businesses of all sizes. It's not just for B2C, it's also for B2B and service-based brands. So, if you'd like a recording of that, hit us up, check out our YouTube. And well, let's cut to the chase in the main event, which is obviously our talk. We have 3 amazing guests here today with us that are all ready to dive into investment, scaling, and the trends that will follow in 2024. For any startup founder or even entrepreneur that are looking to make moves in this year, in case you're not familiar with the 3 smiling faces that we have here today. We have first and foremost Anthony Rose, the CEO and founder of SeedLegals. He is also the man behind BBC iPlayer. So warm welcome to Anthony. Let's give a yes. Alex, who is the CEO and founder of SQL, and moderating we have Sadia, who is the editorial director of Sifted, the global kind of news and trends network for everything European startups related. That is me done. Thank you so much. I'll leave it off to our panelists and Alex. Please enjoy the event.
Here, 4 seats in front.
Yeah, do we need the photographer? No, so we've got 3 seats in front still ready. Please make sure everyone is seated, has a drink or something nice, and enjoy.
So, thank you so much for our lovely intro. Thanks both for joining me today. I thought, I'll just jump in, I think. I thought it would be interesting to start quite broad today. So I think it's fair to say that 2023 was quite a tough year for fundraising startups. A lot of teams avoided raising if they could help it. Rounds took longer to close. Investors were a little harder to convince.
This is good news week here. So 2023 was bad, 2024 will be worse.
This is a spoiler.
My question is...
That's just a question.
My question is, will 2024 be different? Are we about to turn a corner, or are we just in for more of the same?
Yeah, well, firstly, a negative prediction for 2024. I kind of agree with Anthony. I think, 2024 will be the year of the unicorns. So, there's a lot of unicorns out there. Well, there's many unicorns. There's a lot of unicorns out there that raised way too much money and still had terrible unit economics. And those companies are going to go out of business. They've paused their raising for the past 1.5 years, and many of them are going to run out of money this year. So I think startup shutdowns, which are massively accelerated in the past year, both here in the US, I'm sure Anthony sees this data, even more than me, I think that's going to continue for the first half of this year, maybe even the second half of this year. So that's the negative side. On the positive side, that is actually, I think, a healthy thing for the ecosystem, right? There is no scarcity of capital for startups. What there is a scarcity of high-quality founders, right? And, there's a lot of tourists that have come in, both as founders and as investors over the past 5 or 6 years into the venture capital ecosystem. Those tourists are going to leave, and it's going to be easy to see who the better founders are. It's going to be easy to see who long-term investors are. So, obviously, everyone in this room is a long-term founder or investor and not a tourist. And so I'm sure overall everyone in this room will see something positive come from those tourists.
So the way I look at it is that, back in a few years ago, things were great. But whenever you as a founder want to do something, you always think, should I do it now or should I wait? And I think, for me, waiting is always a bad thing. People always think, I'll wait, I'll do my marketing campaign after Easter. And then after Easter it'll be, oh no, it's already getting to summer and I'll do it later. Waiting just means nothing happens. And the challenge is when times are not good, you might think, I'll wait for times to be better. So I was joking about 2024 being worse. But what happens is, the company's raised in good times, and then times went south, and so they thought, well, I'll just wait. How long can it be until times are good again? But it turned out to be quite a long time. And so you might, people going, well, at the end of 2023, things will be ticking up again. And so people who waited and were still hemorrhaging money when the end of 2023 came and it didn't get better, had even a bigger problem because they didn't downsize or get to cash flow break even, and they're waiting. So now, as a founder, looking to raise now, maybe it's your first funding round, so it's a hobby, it's not costing you any money. It can stay as a hobby forever, but should you wait for things to get better, or should you raise now? And if you do have a company, like my own company, you've raised a while back, cash flow break even, should we do a new round now, or should we wait? And the challenge of waiting is, it's firstly, time is money, and secondly, if you can be sort of counter-cyclical, you may have an advantage. So if indeed things get better, everyone else who was waiting is now going to be competing for the same investors. And everyone else, if you could hire people now, because there are layoffs and so on, well actually, when things are better, those are going to be in hot demand. So it's all about, to me, as a founder, structuring what you are doing to take advantage, no matter whether it's good or bad, of the present, rather than waiting for a future, because any number of wars, whatever can break out between now and whenever, waiting on something to get better, I think, is not a good strategy.
I'd also add to that, the investors that are investing this year are probably the smartest investors. Typically, you go through these big cycles of venture capital. The smartest investors know that in these years where everyone else is fearful, it's time to be greedy and it's time to deploy. You're getting generally slightly better valuations, and there are a lot of companies, a lot of very successful companies that are formed in this down period. So typically as a founder, you'll find a lot of the investors that are still committing this year are the ones that are the smartest, they'll stay with you the longest, they'll support you the best. So I think it is a good year to raise money.
But it may be your next question, but I think the other thing is design your business to be more investable. And that in good times, in 2021 and so on, was forget getting to cash flow break even, forget the burn rate, which is to raise squillions to take over the world. And those tigers and soft banks and so on, that didn't work. And investors are not doing that anymore. Firstly, because they realised it was a bad thing, and secondly, when they were earning 0% interest at the bank, anything speculative was a good thing. But now they're getting 5%, or their mortgage is costing them 8% if they're an angel investor, whatever it might be. So the cost of capital is high, so they're looking for a more likely return on investment. And a good example of the change is, we did our Series A round in 2019. We raised from Index Ventures. And from 2019 to 2021, every board meeting, they gently teased / poked me and my co-founder, you need to be spending more of our money. Why have we invested in you to keep it in the bank? Spend it. And my co-founder, who's an ex-VC and angel investor, was going, no, I don't want to be on this treadmill and having to raise. Cut to 2022, board meetings like, thank God you haven't spent all of our money. Our other investments are hemorrhaging money, and literally millions a month. I mean, I see Brex is like burning $17 million a month or something. It's unbelievable. So, so what you want to do is, to increase. Firstly, you want to increase your runway, so you're not beholden to investors to raise at a down time. And secondly, you want to show a path to profitability, because investors will be moving. Some will still want the moonshots, but the vast majority will be looking to see the more you burn is the more they're going to get diluted before they ever possibly get a return.
Yes, I think you did actually answer my next question there, which was, what should founders be doing differently this year? So, Alex, what do you think?
I'll disagree with answering this one.
We agree to disagree.
So look, I tend to say the advice which is good for the average founder tends to be the opposite of the advice which is good for the best founders. And obviously everyone in this room is the best founders. So typically, I try to zag when others are zigging, and depending on your business, depending on your stage, this could be a year to deploy money. Through various marketing channels, the cost of acquisition of customers has come down significantly, because a lot of startups have significantly pulled back on marketing. So that's what I'm doing. I'm investing at a time with SQL when a lot of other startups are pulling back capital. But again, that's probably not good advice for every founder. But for the best, I think that is good advice. So this year, when everyone's doing one thing, it's kind of interesting to kind of do the opposite. There are a lot of opportunities that come from doing the opposite of what everyone else is doing. So that's one thing to think for. If you guys think you're in the top percentile of founders, think about that.
When it comes to those, best founders you refer to, I think it's also interesting to think about the sectors that, are hot. I mean, in 2023, it was AI and climate that all the investors seem to be obsessed with. In 2024, do you think that's going to change? What other sectors do you think might come into the limelight?
I think healthcare is a very interesting one, and linked to that, biotech. I'm going to thank one of my team members, Ben, who's sitting over there, for doing some research today. But we've gone from a sort of period of investing in atoms, which you call in the 1900s, to investing in bits, and now with the advent of CRISPR and various other gene technologies, I think there's an interesting opportunity to invest in biotech and healthcare. So I think we're going to see a real growing interest and growth in venture investment in healthcare. And even you saw that towards the end of last year. Biotech has really taken off in Q4 last year in terms of attracting VC investments. I think that's one interesting thing. We've also got much more, I guess, popular people promoting longevity. People like Brian Johnson, some of you guys may have seen his Blueprint stuff, Living Vampire. And he's an interesting character, but I do think all this longevity and healthcare stuff is going to become more mainstream. A lot of the existing healthcare services, both here in Europe and in the US, are very focused on sort of reactive healthcare, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to be more proactive with how they're thinking about health. So there are a lot of startups in that space going to do very well this year. And beyond that, last year we saw this trend in the US of American dynamism, which I think we're going to start to see come to Britain, in Europe, before the rest of Europe. We have a very good defence sector here, and I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities in defence tech, logistics, a lot of our hard tech, which the past 10 years has not been very popular, because it was seen as R&D with no commercial applications. And I guess, I don't want to say a positive effect, but one of the outcomes of the various challenges in Ukraine and the Middle East is people realizing how important our defense is, and that it's not about warmongering, it's about actually protecting people. So I can see in the UK that being a real growing sector. So British dynamism would be my second one.
Interesting. So those are brilliant, but as a founder, your challenge, of course, is if you're not into particular segments, what are you going to do to increase your investability? I was at an event where there was an investor going, electric batteries are the go. And I'm going, who in the room is doing electric batteries? So you're just going to wake up one day and go, you know what, my accounting software, I'm over it. I'm into battery production. So the segments are interesting. I think what's perhaps more interesting from the investor side is super interesting because that's where you're directing your money. But as a founder, you are in a particular segment. So how do you make yourself more investable? And obviously the key thing that everyone can do is where AI fits in the strategy. And here I think it's a bit difficult because if you don't mention AI anywhere in your slide deck, investors might be going, you're a bit behind the times. But as soon as you start sprinkling AI, you might invite the investor to start asking complex questions. And if the answer is the team dabbles on ChatGPT on a Saturday, it's not a very good answer. So I think what's happening with AI, it seems that it's gone into the deep tech. We've got NVIDIA cards, we're building large language models through to, we're just using ChatGPT. So I think everyone is expecting every company to be embracing AI to work more efficiently. And then there's some who are creating, entirely new businesses, but without any major deep tech, but productizing the things around us. And then a small number, creating really complicated, differentiated things. And I think here the challenge is how do you add an extra zero to your valuation with suitable, sprinkling of AI, and then, it will be interesting to see when that bubble starts bursting. I see in my space legal tech companies raising large amounts on large valuations, and it's interesting. I'm yet to see that AI, it's fantastic, but I've yet to quite see it solve many problems that you wanted. You can get 80% of the way there in an hour, and the rest of the 20% takes a long time to get there. And so I don't know the answer, but I think to find the right balance of spreading some AI sprinkling in your pitch deck, but without getting grilled that you've pitched yourself as an AI company when you're not.
I'm going to disagree again with that. So, look, if you're going to use AI, use it to solve a real problem for your customers. Don't do it for your pitch deck. Any good investor will see through that in 10 minutes. So solve a real problem for your customers or your internal team, which is going to actually drive value to the business. And that may add zero to evaluation, but just putting it in your pitch deck definitely won't. Use it to solve real problems. And it's actually quite easy to use. In fact, me and Nancy are maybe working some things together on that front, but it's actually quite easy to use quite quickly, deploy quite quickly if your team are used to using it. But focus on solving a real customer problem or real internal problem to improve efficiency in your operations team. And that will inform investors that you know a little bit about this technology, and it will inform them that you're kind of ahead on the trend. But if you put it in there just for the sake of catching onto a trend, I can show you a graveyard full of crypto companies, full of VR companies who've just been put in their deck for the latest trend and live to regret it. Because once it becomes like you're part of this trend, well, if that trend sort of tapers off or goes into reverse, as is the case with those two previous trends, you're in trouble. So use it to solve a real customer problem.
Sorry, by the way, I wasn't in any way implying just to put it in your deck. My assumption is you're actually using it. So see, because I've created a chat plot which makes so many mistakes, I have not let it loose on my customers, and I want to do some interesting things with AI. Should I, in my pitch deck, talk about it, and then, or just when people ask, of course we've got AI things that are helping our support team operate 35% more efficiently. So yes, you do want to really use it, and how much of song and dance do you want to make? Because once upon a time people go, we host it on cloud servers. It's like, that was exciting. You don't mention that anymore, and that's going to be the commoditization of the AI piece.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say, don't put an empty AI promise in your pitch deck. That's what investors off anything. So on the kind of flip side of that, in the coming year, if you are fundraising and you're putting your pitch deck together, ready to go out there, what do you think is like the most important things to have in your pitch deck in the context of the coming year? What do you think investors are going to be the most concerned about or the most excited about?
For me, I'd say, for the average investor, again, maybe not the best investor, but the average investor, it's going to be traction and metrics, right? So that'll be the way to differentiate yourself. So many startups over the past few years that have raised things based on promises and ideas and concepts, and that's kind of gone unless you have an exceptional track record as a founder who's previously set up a company. So the more you can demonstrate what you've achieved rather than promise the future, and ideally demonstrate that you've done it in a capital efficient way and you have been earning loads of money to achieve that, I think that's something that will excite investors. Traction and capital efficient traction, two important things.
So I think, and now I'm worried. So I think the one day when you've got revenue and revenue is growing year on year, investors look at the revenue chart and go, that's fantastic. What do you do again? When you don't yet have revenue, you go back a level where maybe you've got your growth in users or it's retention. And if you go back before that, then it's about the product that you've got that's exciting. If you go back even further, it's just a slide deck, and it's all about the founders. So you're selling, or rather the investor is weighting different factors at different stages. At the beginning, there's no evidence that anyone's going to want it, that it's going to work, that you're going to be able to build a team, and so on. So they're betting on the founders and the way you pitch that proposition. And later on, you kind of prove the point that you can build a team, that you can get investment that customers wanted, and now it's about how you're going to grow it and scale it, what's your competition going to do, and so on. But if you're in the early stage, it's, I, as Alex has talked to many founders, and I think my take is, you tell me if you agree, I think you're kind of thinking about 8 seconds whether this is like a stellar founder, and then that's your heart talking, and then the rest of the 30 minutes is your head trying to justify it one way or the other. And I think you want a founder that exudes this not only optimism, because that could be optimism without execution, but the ability to visualize something and that you trust that they're going to be able to deliver it. And with enough enthusiasm that stopped short of maybe sometimes this American more traits of you've drunk so much of your own Kool-Aid that it's quite unbelievable, and you're not going to listen to any feedback or criticism or pointing out that it won't work. So I think it's the heart wanting to buy in that. And if that can come out through the story in your pitch deck that you're telling about how you're solving the problem, I think one of the things for me, which is a big no-no in a pitch deck, is often pitch decks say what you do rather than why anyone wants it. And the standard thing I see is you talk to a founder, they tell you passionately about this amazing thing they're doing, and then they send a pitch deck, and the pitch deck goes, the problem, this, and this, and you're going, dude, I have no idea what you're doing. If you haven't told me, I wouldn't have guessed it. So how do you get the pitch deck, or the video pitch, which I think may be more the thing, to tell that story? But he built an AI thing to analyze pitch decks, so he's going to know much more about this.
Yeah, like I don't disagree with you. Like, you know, you definitely you can tell within like the first 30 seconds of meeting a founder generally like a strong signal, honestly, about whether you'll invest or not, particularly a very early stage company. The way you should see a pitch deck is a door opener to a meeting. It's like a calling card. It should not be telling the investor everything about your company. There needs to be some mystery in there. There's no romance without mystery. I'm not saying that, but it's about 10 times in these talks before. There's no romance without mystery. So leave a bit of it out, but you need to tell a story and capture the story enough to get them to commit to a meeting. That's all it is. No one's going to, very rarely, make an investment decision solely based on the pitch deck or something. So keep it short. And keep it just the highlights reel. You don't need to answer all the questions. Just make enough to commit to the call, and then you can get on that call and you can engage them. And as Anthony says, charm them in the first 10 seconds, and get to a point where you're showing what you trust them enough to share a lot more information. By the way, which is a problem because some people don't use your information correctly. Trust them enough to share that information, and then hopefully that leads to the investment decision.
So that last bit meant that we both get pitch decks that have been shared with other people, and often for competitors forwarded. So assume that investors may well forward your pitch deck. So you probably want to keep the business plans and other things, for later stage in the discussion, and the earlier ones. You can never get an investor to sign an NDA. You hope that they won't forward it, but people are in syndicates, they forward to people in the syndicates, and the people in syndicates didn't speak to you directly, so they don't feel any obligation not to forward it to others. So I've had people send me our competitors' pitch decks, like, okay, that's nice. I'm not sending you my one because I know where that's going. So,
be very careful on that, particularly when VCs are reaching out to you proactively. In many cases, that means they're already in discussion with a competitor and they're doing competitive research. So be very careful with that. I also agree with what Anthony said about videos. Videos are a very powerful way to connect with investors. So if you want to stand out, you can send a video pitch. I'd recommend doing it alongside a deck, because some investors won't actually spend the time to watch the 3 or 4 minute video you've done. The average time they spend on decks is like 30 seconds. So do both, but videos can be a very powerful way to create connection as well.
and thanks to our sponsor, you could do the TikTok video.
Looks getting paid for this.
Nice plug there. Mark has really, really good advice. It's super interesting. So one of the big things to know to consider when it kind of comes to that investment process is obviously valuations. And startups that raised at, some would say, perhaps inflated valuations in 2021 when everyone and their dog was investing, right? Might be looking to raise again this year, but have to sort of consider what that valuation is going to look like. I'm interested to hear from you both on, are we looking at a year of flat and down rounds as a result, and what kind of advice would you give to founders who find themselves in that position?
Yes. So, there are a couple of problems. One is how you pick a valuation and justify it with investors. And the other one is what to do if you can't get the valuation that you want. So, for example, once your company has revenue, then often investors will value it at a multiple of revenue, depending on the sector you're in and the rate of growth. And it might have been in 2021, apart from some crazy American valuations, maybe people would take your annual recurring revenue, multiply it by a number between 10 and 15 to come at valuation. So you're doing £1 million a year revenue, maybe you could raise it at 10 to 15 million valuation. But then that dropped in 2022 and 23, somewhere between maybe 5 and 10x, maybe sort of 6 to 8 mostly. So the challenge then was a company that may have raised at a particular valuation, now saw those halve, and even though business may have increased, maybe it got worse, and now can't raise at that valuation now. Or you had hoped to raise it much higher, but you just can't justify it. So what I've seen is a big change in behavior from companies. Some small number can raise and keep doing it. Many might put off a fundraising. Instead of doing a new round, they just keep topping up their last round. And so there's been a huge change from now on SeedLegals. 70% of all the amounts raised are not in a funding round. It's with seed fast ahead of a round, or with the instant investment top up a round. And so a company might have gone, I've raised 3 million, I'm going to raise 10 in my next round. I just can't get the valuation I want, so it's going to be way too much dilution. So I'm going to go a bit lower on my expansion plans, and I'm going to just reach out to existing shareholders, new investors, and raise another few million, and I'll wait till things get better. And it's an interesting strategy, and it might also be the most aggressive ones are not doing that, and everyone else is. Or maybe if you are more or less cash flow break-even, and you can design your dinner, so to speak, that you're in control of your destiny. Do I do a bigger round and more dilution, or do I do a small round? Then I've got less money to grow in marketing, and I'll grow more organically. And I don't know if the answer will be different, but to think about how your fundraising may not be discrete things every few years, but more of a sort of an envelope as you are somewhat continuously raising. Thoughts?
I agree with all of that. From my own experience, it's my first company. SeedLegals was my second company. I had an intro on that, but I'll explain more what we did later. First company was called Velocity Lab, and it was an AI-powered concierge before AI was cool. And we raised about $30 million in our first 3 years. We bought 3 other companies, and I definitely don't recommend people do that, by the way. Bought 3 other companies in 3 months, in 3 different jurisdictions. Wow. And at one point, we were burning $1 million a month. And we were looking at the sort of forecast and thinking, fucking hell, we have to raise a shit ton of money at some point to make this whole thing work, right? But there is an alternative, and it's called revenue, right? It took us 3 years to figure this out. Look, you guys can benefit from my lesson. We did completely turn it around, and by 6 years in, we were a cash flow positive company, and it had a very good evidence. We sold it for a lot of money. But there is an opportunity, as Anthony says, to take the destiny into your own hands, right? Depending on where you are on the journey. We did take, as Anthony said, we took a little bit more money after we raised all that money, a little top up from our existing shareholders, mostly to kind of get us through that period of getting to generating positive cash flow. But there is a way of building a sustainable business without having to raise round after round. And if you're in a sector, or you're in you're at a place where you've raised a lot of money already, and a new round, maybe like a very big down round, and it's going to really upset your existing shareholders and dilute you so much that you'll no longer be passionate about the business, I would definitely suggest trying to hard pivot and become cash flow positive. And you can do it. I recently wrote something on this called Turnaround for Startups. So if you want to read that, I'll look at my Substack. But revenue. It's this other alternative, non-dilutive financing, and it's very healthy. So,
And does that include where does downsizing the team come into that?
that is a part of it. In some cases, it depends on your situation, but that is a part of it. It's the sad part of it, and and the hardest part of that is the psychological part, right? And we had to do that actually during COVID with my first company. And actually, COVID was the first year we were cash flow positive. We did a lot of other things, but one of the things was downsizing the team. And the way you've got to look at that is, you're saving a lot of jobs and future value by unfortunately having to let go of a few people, right? And that's the way to look at it, because that's the truth. And that will hopefully help you make the right decisions.
So on that note then, in 2024, given the environment you can see, how should founders approach hiring this year? Do you think we need to be reluctant? Is growth the sort of objective? What are your thoughts on that?
I hate paying recruiters. And,
Sorry,
And the recruiters here?
once upon a time, you know, there were sort of jobs for life, and you'd expect to work for the Toyota company for the rest of your life and so on, and that was like permanent employment. But these days in London, you know, it's like the turnover is like 18 months, 2 years, or something like that. So the thought of paying a 20% commission to somebody leads to all the wrong behaviours. You don't want to fire people because you paid so much to hire for them. It seems really bad. Anyway, separate rant from maybe the new starters But you know, the measure for me is in good times, you find that the major companies like Hopin, who've raised millions, start, you know, you live in mortal fear of waking up in the morning and your tech team's defective, someone's going to pay them double the salary. And then you find the pendulum swings the other way and everyone's leaving Facebook because they're bored of writing, you know, moderation software or something like that. And then they're coming back, and then the Hopin guys lay off 35% of their staff one day or something, which is like hundreds of people, and suddenly the pendulum swings. So if you're able to hire when there is more talent available, which is hard because it's the opposite, when money's available, that is good. I think one of the challenges with hiring is, you know, if you hire too fast, then you just build up this machine that wants to build stuff, but if you don't know as an executive team or as a product team what it is they're going to build, it just becomes incredibly inefficient. And I kind of I always used to be really frustrated. The backlog was bigger, you know, than the set of things you're doing. The backlog is huge, it's insane. And now I like it, the fact that it's a liberating thing. There's a big backlog, and every week or whenever you do it, you pick the most important things. And if it didn't get done, it's not a failure to get it done, it's actually just meant it wasn't the most important thing. So I've kind of slightly changed that. But, you know, I'm intrigued and sometimes jealous when I see companies, you know, raising huge numbers of people, but in fact, having lots of people is kind of a failure to have the same business with fewer people, and that will be more, you know, much more of an issue when you see AI, where you're hiring people now who will be replaced, or you're hiring a small number of people to use AI to operate more efficiently. I don't know the answer. At SeedLegals, I have my team who I've set up and persuaded to create ChatGPT apps and so on. No one is going to put themselves out of business, but they're going to be hopefully doing a lot more and doing more outreach because the AI can generate things or matching, and hopefully they'll be having a lot of fun doing it. I might not hire more people, but operate more efficiently. I think that's the fun thing to do. But it's always tempting to just want more people to do more things. Can you change your thinking that you pick the most important things and sort of set the team size as more of the constraint?
Yeah, I agree with that. So we can go on to the next question. I'll ask the next question.
Yeah, so if a company, you know, does decide to hire, you know, they're in a position to scale their headcount and grow from a small business into something a little bit bigger, how do you, as a founder and an executive team, kind of maintain the company culture that you start with, that people, your early employees join the company? And how do you kind of make sure that everyone in your team is still aligned on what that main mission is?
A lot of thoughts on that. So I've got two of my team in the room. You're actually accounting. Yeah, look, firstly you have to define the culture, right? That's really important. And most founders don't think strongly enough about this. What is culture? It's not like ping pong beers on Friday night. It's like a set of values which should be relatively controversial. Right? So those values should tell someone if they're looking at joining your company that it's the right place for them. Like an example might be Facebook used to be move fast and break things, right? That's one end of the spectrum, and Apple might be the opposite end of the spectrum, which is get things perfect before you ship them. And you need to have values which are relatively controversial like that, where someone can say, okay, this is the right company for me or not, because then they're self-filtering out, that's less interviews you have to do. Second thing on this point is once you define that culture, I spend the majority of my time on hiring, and I think every founder should, on the hiring process, on interviews, on defining the culture, on following up on the culture and selling the company. And that is the best way I think any founder can spend their time. And probably sales comes a close second, but defining the culture, spending your time on the hiring process are two of the most important things you do as a founder. And I still interview or speak to at least every single person that joins the SQL. I did it Velocity right up until the end as well. So no one could join the company that had spoken to the founder. That was unexternal employees. So it's worth investing time in doing that, and it pays dividends because you will find some people when you get to that talk that really not fit, and no one's really thought about that in the interview process beforehand. So it's worth the time investment, and if you get that right, honestly, like for me, in terms of the type of people I look for, and Alberto reports into me, so he knows this. I like hiring people who don't even manage it, right? So they are self-fast, they're going to go and do stuff themselves without relying on me or waiting for me. And Alberto's waiting for you on a number of things right now. So, so if you hire the right people, they manage themselves. You don't need managers, you don't need HR. There's all sorts of things you don't need if you focus on really hiring the right people. So that's my answer.
So a while back, Index Ventures organised this event run by McKinsey for some of their portfolio, and I went. It was really interesting because we were about 30 people at SeedLegals at the time. We're now 160, and I had some growth pain points with some of my team. And in this event, I realised, because they said what happens in the early stage of the companies, your initial hires are joining because of the sort of cult of the founders to some extent, and it's also about the purpose of the business. But as your business grows, those people who report directly to the founders at some point no longer may report. And the business changes from purpose to performance. It's not just building this cool thing to change the world. Your sales team have got metrics and KPIs and bonuses, and it's being measured. And at this point, which often may be around 30 people, your hires may lose contact with the founders. It's no longer daily talking to them. You can't talk to everyone yourself. And so the team now needs to be a proxy for the mission and values of the company. And one of my early team members was exactly at this pain point. And I realized it wasn't just unique, it was more of a general thing. So now we're 160 people, and I still insist on doing the final interview with everyone. I explain this is much for them to ask me questions, it's for me to ask them questions. The questions they ask me are actually the real interview piece, which is more important than I ask them. At this point, the tech team have really done the technical, questions. So but it's also really valuable because people tell me, my team say, hey, the person was so pleased to talk to the CEO, they put their time into it, they selected us against some other company as a result. So, but that also gives me sometimes the only opportunity for a while to explain what's important and so on. And I often joke that I love employing people who don't do what you tell them to do. They think about you should never do what people tell you to do, particularly if it's me. You should always think about what the underlying problem is to be solved, and not really, the reason why you're doing it, then think through a better solution to it. So, but people still join us at the end of it.
This is your sort of 5-minute warning that we will have a chance for audience questions, so start thinking them up. I think I've been under strict instruction that we're going to limit them to 4, so make sure it's a good one.
Think before you speak.
Yeah, before we do, my kind of last question for you is on the topic of culture. How do you think startup life is going to change in 2024? I feel like we've gone through fully remote working when we had to, and then we've got hybrid working, and digital nomads working around Europe. AI is making its way into work processes. What do you think is going to define kind of working with startup in 2024?
I'll focus on one point, which is remote working, which I think companies that are fully remote, on average, have a significant disadvantage versus companies that are in person. If you want to get the best out of your team, I promise you having them in person, certainly at least the majority of the time, if not all the time, will mean that they understand what you're doing a lot more. They will be more passionate about their work, they're less likely to leave, they're going to stay with the company a lot longer. And so I'd really recommend any founders who are thinking about whether they should stay remote or move to all in person. You get so much more of your team if you move to in person. The second point related to that is it's actually extremely unfair on people that start their career to be fully remote. They lose out so much. Think of all the conversations you have when you're in person in the office, and the young person might be able to have with the founder and the CEO just at the water cooler or going out to lunch or coffee. And while you can replicate some of that remotely with a lot of effort and time, it's very hard to do. And and you have these young people who may not be earning very much. They're literally sitting at a tiny desk in their bedroom, if not on their bed, on a laptop, right? And so they're not in a perfect work environment. And so I think it's bad for team members, particularly people that start their career. I think it's bad for companies. And my advice to all my portfolio companies is to be in person. And a few of the ones that I invested in the past, particularly during the COVID era, started off fully remote. And now, rowing back on that and getting offices, which I'm really happy to see. So that'll be one thing that I think is going to change a lot this year. People are going to realise the value of working in person, and they're going to enjoy it more as founders, and junior team members are going to enjoy it more, and you'll get a lot more out of it.
Strong sense.
I used to insist, I would only hire people who lived in London and could be in our office, and otherwise it was just not going to work. And then COVID hit and everyone went home, and it's like no one skipped a beat, just in Zoom and Slack, and everyone was already talking to ourselves and customers online. And so I went, well, that's fantastic. But of course, younger team members, apartments, London, they want to get out. And I found that people living in Bristol would go off and find local workspaces and so on to hang out. So really it's just evolved into you can be in the office when you want. My goal is to give you a nice office that you can come into if you want. And then the question is how pushy we should be. And so I gently bribe people with 1 or 2 lunches on us to come into the office. The mileage varies. Our support and sales team are very gregarious and want to be in the office. Our tech team, with the stick, you can't poke them in the office. And it was our CTO wants them in the office, and small discussions suggested that everyone would just leave if he tried, so that didn't go well. And so you end up with this sort of different balance. One of the interesting things is this digital nomad, and I discovered when talking to people on Zoom calls, there were palm trees in the background. So, that is not the case. No, I'm in this week. So what the fuck? So I'm jealous here. Why am I? So we've now put a policy: if you want to be out of the country for more than 30 days, you have to get permission, because otherwise it gets silly. And I saw in one of the founder groups somebody had exactly the same thing. You actually end up with tax issues, and then you discover people living elsewhere, and you're paying PAYE and national insurance, and they can never collect it, and so on. So you can still go off, but after some period you have to go off and get permission, and then you also have to do it on UK office hours, otherwise it becomes silly. But otherwise, I've just gotten as far as I don't care where you work, and I provide a nice office. I don't know if it's right. I think one of the challenges is what you want yourself as a founder, because I like nothing better than to never leave home, where I have the perfect work set up, my wife is there, we have lunch together, and I thought of going into an office just seems bizarre. I get my audience from events, so it's hard for me to be hypocritical and say you have to be in the office, but I'll see you on Zoom. Would you like to be in the office?
Yeah, look, I think everyone likes some flexibility. And to be clear, SeedLegals did give people some flexibility and say you can work from home 1 day a week at the moment. We'll probably keep that, because people do need some flexibility, I think. But I just feel like you'll get a lot more out of people. I think people will enjoy it more, even if at first they're reluctant. Even the engineers have the same problem with their engineers as well. So even the engineers will, and they will learn more about your customers, and there's a lot more cross-pollination between teams. They're able to make better decisions. They need less management. There are a lot of benefits from it, but it's very hard to change from the fully remote or not caring whether you're remote or in office to being in office. But I think it's a worthwhile investment. And if you're lucky enough to still be a very small team, which many of you may be, then I'd make that painful decision quickly and communicate it and get people on board with it, because it becomes much harder if you're, at Velocity Black, we were fully remote during the pandemic, and we didn't turn it. We basically, it was very hard to turn it back at that point with 100% employees. And so the earlier you do it, the easier it is to make that change.
Interesting. So, does anyone have a burning question?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier if a VC reaches out to you, it might be a bad sign you're fishing for competitor information.
Yeah.
How do you know if it's one or the other? Because I've had a few VCs reach out to me and I'm not sure. Should I send them a pitch deck?
Definitely a red flag is they won't necessarily want to do a call. They'll ask for lots of information. They'll say, oh, can you send me a deck? Can you send me your information? And they won't necessarily want to actually meet you or do a call. That's a big red flag. That is almost certain that they're doing competitor analysis, right? So VCs will typically try and build a relationship with you before they extract your data, right? So that's a big red flag, and I would there's a good way to test for this, which is to explicitly ask them in the email, are you investing in any other company in our space? Are you currently looking at any other company in our space, right? I mean, and they, it's almost career suicide for a VC to lie in that response to an email. So you have it in writing. So just ask that question, right? And say, hey, look, really thanks for reaching out. Just to be clear, we're not necessarily currently raising, but are you investing in other companies in our space? Or are you currently looking at any other companies in our space, the competitors, and see how they respond? And then, there's no to both those questions, and you say, fuck Alex, you'll find they're still interested, right? They reached out for valid reasons, they'll still want to speak to you. So, but yeah, like people who are trying to get your information about the call, that's a big red flag.
If you don't get any angry emails after this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like to talk to the investor before sending in the pitch deck. The pitch deck is a summary of the thing. So, investors might go, oh, send the pitch deck before and so we can get up to speed. I don't think anyone ever reads the pitch deck, and then you're in this awkward thing where you can't go through it because the assumption they've read it, but they haven't read it. So I prefer to not send the pitch deck, and actually I prefer to just tell them what we're doing, and then in fact, I don't even actually have a pitch deck. So if you can complete that with the spreadsheet of the business things and skip the whole pitch deck, of course that mileage varies, right? And if you're applying to an SEI fund or something, they just go send us the pitch decks. So it's going to vary depending on the stage of the business and the investor you're talking to. But if you can use the first meeting as a face-to-face, I can do one face-to-face, and not share the pitch deck beforehand. The pitch deck comes a bit later. That would be my suggestion.
You get the award for the best shirt.
Thanks so much.
In the yes, sorry, I'm pointing at Sim.
I was very interested when you said they don't read the pitch deck. Right? Would you say that having a good website that describes what you do and explains your products and has like a clear business model, like pricing and all that, is more important than actually having a pitch deck? Would you say?
You take that one first.
Well, for raising money, not necessarily. Certainly for your business. Yeah. Of course. I focus on doing that for your business. And a lot of sophisticated VCs are now like trawling into websites, gathering data. So, they will. A lot of the best VCs will have already like taken all the data from your website and done some interesting things with it to see if it fits their thesis or whether it's a relevant company for them. And they've done that with Companies House and various other public sources of information. At least the most sophisticated ones would have done that. So, it's obviously worthwhile having a good website, but it's more worthwhile for your customers and focusing on that than it is necessarily thinking about it from an investor perspective. And maybe you have a sub-page if you want to talk to investors about your business, maybe you have a sub-page focused on that, but speak to your customers on the website.
See, I disagree. I don't really, but I have to say. but I'm not an investor myself. It just causes conflicts of interest for SeedLegals. But my focus is always, as a proxy investor, would a customer get what you're doing, and can you explain what you're doing to a customer? And if you can, and they want it, then I would want to invest. So to me, I will always look at the person's website, mostly because I have no idea what they're doing from their pitch deck.
That's what I'm asking.
Right, so I like, and you'll probably tell me completely disagrees, that I like the start of the pitch deck to be essentially explaining a problem as if I was a customer rather than an investor. And as it proceeds, then it of course switches to customers don't need to know my gross margin and my customer acquisition cost, but this is for the investor. But if I get it as a customer, I may not literally be looking for your product, but if I can perceive that the customer would, that's good. And then I would like to see that the deck and your website sort of match together, because to me it just indicates the company's got its act together, the single branding across everything, single messaging. And if I find a deck is very different to the website, that's a problem. One caution, by the way, I see, we do the majority of all the SEIS applications, and people make a nicely crafted pitch deck, often without feedback, that has HMRC want to agree that this is meets the risk to capital, and does enough too much blockchain and stuff like that. And you've got a great pitch deck, and then HMRC look at your website and it says completely the opposite. You know, we're a software technology, we're a Bitcoin trading platform. So why did you have to do that? So make sure that certainly with SEIS, that for the purposes of HMRC, the major what are you doing in your pitch deck does not conflict too much with your website.
Yeah, definitely agree with the point of making your pitch deck, the first line should talk to as if you were a customer. Like the number of pitch decks I see online, I don't have any idea what this is. And like honestly, you just immediately out the door. You're not going to bother speaking to the founder, to be honest. So try and speak as if to a customer, make it easy to understand.
Amazing. Are we
Two more.
Two more.
two more?
Yeah.
I did promise four, so hands up. In the blue shirt.
Great, thanks. I want to ask, just from the perspective of working with a lot of angel investors and also deploying angel investment, do you have a sort of a take on the recent regulatory change around? I know it's a hot topic, so I didn't want to go without.
Yeah, I mean, very strong opinions on this. So yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, there's a change to Financial Promotions Act, I think it's called, where basically there's an increase in threshold for someone to be defined as a high net worth investor from £100,000 to £170,000 as annual income, £250,000 to like 400 or 1,000 in assets. And very strong opinions about this. I think it's terrible for the startup ecosystem. I think it's a big step backwards. Not only does it like basically undemocratize angel investing, which I think is a bad thing for investors, right? There's a lot of people that could invest in this very attractive asset class that now won't be able to as of next week. It basically reduces diversity in the investor base. A lot of particularly female investors are going to be very negatively affected by this change in the law. And for startups, obviously reduces potentially reported capital. There are some caveats to that, and Anthony will touch on it. I'm not going to steal his thunder because you only told me before. But it's in general, it's very bad. It's very anti-startup change. I don't understand why they've done it. My analogy that I use when I'm speaking to politicians about this, which I have done, is okay, you as a government let someone walk into a casino where the odds are literally stacked against them and bet whatever they want, and there's no productive output from them making that bet in the casino. You won't let that same person go and invest in the startup, which has a very positive impact for the UK economy and lots of other positive impacts, and yet they never have an answer for that. So yeah, like I think it's a really strange message to send. Whether the impact of it is as big as I'm intimating is another question, but it's a very negative message to send to both startups and investors.
It's a great question and a passion point for me. So let me ask, who is aware of this financial promotion FCA change? Okay, quite a few people. Who here has raised investments for their company already, previously? A few people. When you raised investment, do you know if your investors ever saw one of these pop-up messages that they had to agree with? Probably not. So essentially, in a nutshell, the FCA has said, if you these two warning messages, that self-certification on a high net worth or a sophisticated investor, then the bar has gone up. But what everyone is missing in this, I think some panicked response, is that hardly anyone goes in that entrance. So the way I liken it is your fundraising is like Westfield. There are 5 entrances to your Westfield. The government has made 2 of the entrances slightly more boarded up, but the other 3 entrances are just as wide open as before. So the first one is if you go through a regulated platform, so you list on investors or using an Odin syndicate or something like that, those platforms are obligated to show these warnings, and that's going to make it a bit harder. But if you raise directly, so you meet somebody and you go, would you like to invest? Can I send you a seed fast to add you to the round? Or whether you SeedLegals or law firm, nobody needs to see these messages in the first place. No one needs to go to that. Nothing has changed. And if you use a crowdfunding platform, they've got a different exemption, which is the everyday investor, which is I'm not spending more than 10% of my net assets on speculative investments here, and that hasn't changed. And of course, you can always find foreign investors, and none of this applies to them. So I reckon of everyone fundraising on SeedLegals, 90% of all the investors would not even have known about this. So I now have a slight conflict because I think these changes are stupid and bad. It's ridiculous. You can go to a casino and bet, and you can't be at bet. And I see wonderful SeedLegals customers. You know, one of my favourites is Sophia from Sourdough Sophia Bakery. She's got a bakery in Hackney. She wants to open some more, and she's been fundraising, and she's made like 100 seed fasts. I'm convinced everyone coming to her store, she says, would you like a baguette of sourdough, and can I send you an investment? Anywhere from £500 to £20,000. She's raised 200k this way. It's fantastic. And the thought of having to establish each of these people has £170,000, but none of this applies. So, anything that makes that harder seems like seriously bad. I think what's interesting is you want to make sure that investors are educated so they understand what is a good investment, and you want to make sure that there aren't scam investments there. So it's education rather than just going, you have to be rich. So my take is, on the one hand, I want to support all the messaging saying this is really bad, and I've signed a petition and told them you can put SeedLegals' name there. On the flip side, I think it would be terrible if founders went, I'm not pursuing my dreams and I'm holding off fundraising because it's going to make a change. Because I reckon the other 3 doors in the Westfield, everyone's just going to go through that door. And the only actual change will be some of the people, the investors, in fact, angel investors who create syndicates, and they now go through these platforms. I mean, of course, ultimately it's a self.
One more question, yes.
Yes. Gentleman in the middle. Yeah.
Rick and I have been 10 years ago. I was CTO resident at Sadia London at the early days of the Silicon Roundabout. Obama in the US. We've been through 2 rounds of government in the US. We've got this coming up not only here.
And 12 in the UK.
Traditionally, potential unicorns from here went to the US because there was nothing here. A very interesting thing on the J programme this morning about why, we mentioned looking at the investment here. Do you think that there should be any predictive investment or whatever we should do, anticipating what's going to go on in the US, i.e. the investment pool in this, if Trump gets in, they'll open the doors and no, you can't invest outside that. Any forewarnings we should look for before investment comes in, through the elections? And then subsequently we've got our election here, when governments haven't really stoked up the fire that they could have. I just wonder what the effect of the elections across the Atlantic, if there's any warnings we should look for.
So when I raised the Series B for my last company, we had raised it up until the Brexit vote. And when the Brexit vote happened, that night we had $25 million sitting in our Lloyd's escrow account. And everyone fucking panicked. Like everyone was like, oh my god, this is terrible. And we were like, we're legally obliged to this. We took the money, escrow account, we funded the company, right? But look, everyone was panicking initially, but honestly, within a week, it was like kind of back to business as usual. Like, thankfully, the fact that we have such incompetent governments both in the US means that they limit their impact on startups, as is, exemplified by the previous question, it's relatively limited. And even the most extreme politicians on both sides of the Atlantic would struggle to slow down the startup world.
I'm seeing a lot of people now going on state by state, but Minnesota's good, this is bad. And
well,
they're actually
in the US, I found my second company, I set it up with the US top code based in Delaware, and still my entire team's based here in the UK and haven't moved this up. I'd say Delaware's the best state in terms of investor friendliness in the US, in terms of rules, which means people are more willing to invest in companies that incorporate in Delaware, so that would be the one state I'd recommend people incorporate in the US, particularly for tech startups, caveat with that. But yeah, beyond that, I wouldn't look too much into politics. If you're in the US or the UK, generally we're in a very startup, investor, legal-friendly ecosystem, and compared to the rest of the world, right, it's generally the Wild West. So,
but we're still going to use our unicorns to the States.
Yeah, look, that is a function of the US being the biggest single market, right? It's like my last company, in the end, we had to go and focus on the US because it's by far the biggest market for us, right? So we have to move people to hire people there. And that's really a function of that. along with obviously a lot of talent being over there and a lot of capital being over there. The UK, I'd say London's certainly ahead of a lot of other US cities as a place to base a startup in terms of capital, talent, and market. But yeah, the US is, I think, for a long time going to be the #1 country, at least to focus on from a market perspective, which means that a lot of companies are going to set up over there or incorporate over there, even if they have an engineering team over here or if they hire other people in other parts of the world. They're still going to focus on that in the end. If they want to go down that route of becoming a unicorn or unicorps in the end, yeah, they're still going to focus on that. Anyway, I'll let Anthony answer.
I would say, I would think of it, imagine your investor and how they're deciding what to do. And if I was an investor, I would be deciding to invest in a company based on, do I like this company? And also, do I have any money that I can invest in it? I don't think other things would really come into play, particular things in the future. So I would thinking what would your typical investor be doing? I think it's all about finding something that they'd like to invest in. I wouldn't read anything into this. And remember, as a founder, one of the key things you should be doing is taking advantage of every situation to your benefit. I mean, that's what founders do. So whether it be COVID or Brexit or whatever it is, okay, Brexit, this is going to be harder, so we're going to do this instead. And COVID, we're going to work from home, so I'm going to hassle my landlord for a better rate.
There's no sort of warning signs you should look for. That's what it's really.
Yeah, the other thing is, do your fundraising now and don't wait later.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice. Go ahead and raise your money now. Wait until the 3rd or 4th quarter of this year.
Exactly, because it's again, it's wrap up. It's only going to get worse.
Yeah, thank you both for joining us together. That was a really interesting chat. And thank you all for your questions. Apologies that we didn't get around to everyone, but I'm sure we can harass them in a minute.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for making the time and we have